Alright, so I was asked to do a video of the firewall forward of my Zenith. I do have the instrument panel cover off right now. I just put some new post lights in. So here's the back of this. It is kind of a mess. I try to zip tie this stuff up as best I can, but this is all an electronic instrument panel. There's no vacuum instruments, so there are a lot of wires. All the switches are over on the right side, and I just put some new post lights in. You've got a dimmer over here if you need it. I usually keep them about there. Intercom settings are over here, as well as ELT, hobs. You've got fresh air vents on either corner. Electric flaps are right here. This is the alternator fail indicator. Here you have the, I know there's no oil or fuel pressure, it's not running. You got your primary EFIS right here, and that altimeter should come on live there. There we go. And that has just about everything you need there, honestly. And then I do have backup steam for all of that, altimeter, airspeed, VSI, and then the artificial horizon over here is the 2-axis true track autopilot. So your master switch for that is down on the kind of console area right here, and then you've got your autopilot disconnect switch down here. Yeah, other than that, the engine monitor is down here as well. So this has some fancy stuff. You can see cylinder head temps and EGTs for each cylinder. Basically everything regarding your engine. If you move over here, you can see you got an ammeter. It's got a bunch of fuel computers. So both of these are linked to the GPS over here. So this will tell you, how many gallons are remaining because it has a totalizer, how long the flight's been running, your trip meter, 75 hours on that or whatever, how much time is left on your tanks, timers, all that fun stuff. And then this is kind of the fuel page, so you can see how many gallons you have in the plane, how many you've used, time remaining, your fuel economy in nautical miles per gallon. And since this uses the GPS, that gets figured out in real time, how many gallons you'll have left when you get to your waypoint, and then how much range you have, along with PSI, gallon per hour. It has a meter, and then you can see how much fuel is in each of the 4 tanks. And then you also get, since these are linked, you get backup EFIS if you need it, if the screen dies in the top one, and then you have an HSI, and this will come up with a indicator if you have a flight plan in the GPS. It'll all get linked to here. And then since it knows all the data from the primary EFIS, like your direction and your actual airspeed, it'll calculate your winds aloft, basically, so it'll tell you what direction the winds are coming from, how fast, and then what the crosswind component to that is. So that's pretty handy. And then you also get these little, probably can't see that too well, you get these magenta dot here, you get a dot and a chevron. So the little triangle is your current ground track, and then the chevron is what you need to fly in order to maintain your GPS route. And you'll get a CDI on here as well. So you see you get the magenta one there because it's just in its test. So if I hit enter, that should all go away once it links up with satellites. But anyway, yeah, everything is all on this little EFIS. It's actually a pretty nice setup. And then the GPS is also linked to True Track Autopilot. Nothing here will give vertical guidance because the GPS is non-WAS, but you will get horizontal guidance from this guy as well. You can plug in whatever waypoints you want, and it'll go ahead and fly them if you click it over to nav mode, which I don't have anything armed right now, so it won't. And then you can click altitude hold as well, and you can hear the servos kind of clicking in the back, but it'll click over to that. You just got an old, pretty basic KX170. It's just the comm is hooked up, the nav isn't hooked up to anything. I suppose you could put a VOR indicator in here if you really wanted to. Got a Garmin GTX 320 Alpha transponder. You could do a drop-in replacement for a 327 if you really wanted to. Just pop it out and put a new one in if you wanted something with a screen. This works just fine. It's a standard Mode C transponder, and I do have another unit for 978 ADS-B out and in. Garmin 300 XL. The databases are pretty out of date on this guy, but it does the job. Most everything's in there. I'll probably update those at some point. The only caveat here, I kind of broke the little thumb tab on the memory, so it's kind of a pain to get out of there. You could always buy a new card. And then an old KMA-20 audio panel. These just came actually out of an old Cessna 172, both this and the 170. And then in the center console here, we just have a post light. You have your ignition switch, your headset jacks, and then cabin heat, carb heat, just 12-volt outlet, and then all of your trims are here. So elevator trim, and it's down just because the way the servo's mounted, it's a little bit off, but that's basically center trim. And aileron trim is right there as well, which is really handy because with this lighter plane, as you burn fuel, it will change your side-to-side CG quite a bit. And then your fuel selector for all 4 tanks, and the aforementioned autopilot controls. Standard push-to-talk on the Y stick. I do have the dual stick upgrade on the way, so that'll be going. Right now, there's just this throttle quadrant for throttle, and I don't care for it too much. So I'm going to be moving to a center-mounted throttle. and then the dual stick, which will be, you know, one here and one by the passenger seat. And then you probably saw the interior from the pictures. And excuse the wires again, I'm trying to find a better spot to put these. I did some wiring work and I didn't like them just hanging in there. 3-point harnesses all the way around. Pretty decent cabin space, actually, cargo space, sorry. And then if you run out there, there are the wing lockers that you can see there. And then moving on to firewall forward, I've got a battery tender in there. I had some issues with the earlier batteries that I was putting in there until I upgraded to the bigger one. Yeah, here it is, just standard cooling ducts. The only thing that I have yet to do, so this does have cabin heat. It just runs through there. Yeah, carb heat at the box right here. It all goes around the muffler, muffs. Fuel is over on that side. There's a couple things that are kind of recommended that you do that I haven't gotten around to doing yet. So Jabiru recommends that you take some PVC and kind of run from inside the cooling duct over to each of the coils here. So there's one here and there's one down there, so you just run that down. I need to do that yet. And they also recommend the grounding strap for the engine. So mine just comes from the battery and bolts to this rear plate right here, the accessory plate. They recommend that you bolt that actually by the starter. That it'll help if you have starter issues. I don't have any issues cranking this at all. I've only had one time where it nose started, and it was because it was about 30 degrees, and I haven't hooked choke up yet, which is definitely on my end. But yeah, there's the current shunt for current testing. Big battery. So this plane is extremely nose heavy because of all the avionics. This battery alone is like 30 pounds. It's actually a little excessive. So I might work on ballasting it out because it's pretty easy to get a far forward CG with the leading edge tanks. You know, you've got 2 of them here if you're carrying full fuel and just one person. You can get pretty far forward CG, and it's for that reason that I don't really use the flaps too much, because they'll tilt the plane farther down, and you'll have to really crank on the elevator to flare to land. But yeah, it's pretty standard Jabiru firewall forward 6-cylinder. I try to keep things decently clean and keep things tied up and wrapped. You know, it's sometimes you can't do that, but at least no chafing. The bungee was just replaced about, I don't know, 6 months ago. I noticed some light fraying on it, and so I replaced it. And honestly, I think there is a little bit down in there on this guy, but that'll happen. I think these are actually supposed to be replaced like every year or 2, something like that. And standard Bing carburetor. For the prop, I went with the Sensonic W64 ZK54. W60 ZK54. So it's a smaller prop. You've got quite a bit of clearance on this, actually, if you tilt it. It is a wood fiberglass composite 2-blade prop. I went with the 2-blade over the 3-blade, well, for cost and just because it theoretically is more efficient in cruise. We always store it horizontal, as you're supposed to with wooden props. But yeah, that's the firewall forward. It has the older oil cooler. I'm not going to lie, the cabin heat in this is pretty poor. I don't think it works very good much below about 20 degrees outside air temp, and especially as you get up higher where the air is thinner, it's harder to keep warm. The cabin ceiling is actually pretty decent. I do notice a very small leak kind of right in here from the inside, and I think that's the hardest one to seal. I've tried a bunch of things. You can see I've ripped off some sealing that I put in there, and it's honestly pretty tough to get these perfectly sealed, but I think it's about as good as any Zenith will ever get. And you know, the cabin heat works well enough. Anything below about 20 degrees, I honestly don't really feel like flying anyway. It's not the happiest thing for an air-cooled engine, but I hope this helps. I hope this gives a perspective. Sorry if this was a little late getting out. I've had quite a few people interested in it, so I've just been trying to clean it up and get it ready for sale. So thanks for watching, and thanks for your interest. I hope this was helpful to you.